Too much space? Okay, so too much, I can't fix that in here. Lauren, you said there's too much space. If you, I don't know if you know how to manipulate that. Nope.
Make your voice higher, please.
Raise it higher. Is that all right? And Mom's gonna hear me. So we'll go ahead and get started. I do have a little prepared speech here to introduce everybody to the event. So thank you, first of all, everybody, for coming here to the 2025 Iowa Secular Summit. My name is Jason Donahue. I'm the president of Iowa Atheists and Free Thinkers, an organization who is co-sponsoring this event alongside the Humanists of Central Iowa. We are also thankful to our national co-sponsors, American Atheists and the American Humanist Association. Without the support of our members and our sponsors, events like this would not be possible. You can find more information at the tables in the back where you signed in. We also will have some stickers and cards and things throughout the venue. I would also like to offer a special thanks to our speakers and the panelists today who are making this event a more impactful one. And lastly, I would like to thank Warren and Harry Stein for the generous use of this beautiful venue. So before we introduce the first speaker, I want to welcome you all here and highlight how important events like this are in the current political environment. Today you're going to hear from atheists like me and religious people who consider faith an important part of their life. But we all have that one thing in common, a desire for democracy and a protection of our civil rights. Make no mistake, not only are our religious freedoms and civil rights at risk, but democracy itself is at risk. And when we refuse to reach out across the aisle and through to different communities and find common ground, democracy dies. Unfortunately, theocracy has been creeping more and more into our public lives, invading our bedrooms, dividing our families, and even being used to unravel the very fabric of our secular democracy. This is why we are here. This is why we have events like this, to put a stop to this unraveling. To arm ourselves not with weapons or venomous words or mean Facebook posts, but with understanding and reason and education. To champion the sharing of ideas and to celebrate what makes the United States unique among humanity's history, which is secular government. Power comes from us, not from a king, not from a God, but from us. To continue on the ideals of the Enlightenment and not let them be snuffed out, we have to oppose religious fundamentalism. And we can remember how life was like when our religions had all the power. It is on the people in this room and those that wish they could be here, because yes, there is a lot going on today, we're aware, to make that change. To reject theocracy, to reject kings, and to reject the fracture that sectarian power struggles have created in the United States. Take note of this, that these events are being held not by specific churches, but they're by secular organizations, interfaith organizations that seek to bind humanity together rather than creating super citizens that have more rights than other people. As history has shown us time and again, both in the past and right now today, when equality is under attack, it's the atheists, the free thinkers, the secularists, the humanists, they show up. And that's what we're doing today. Thank you for showing up today, and I hope we all leave with more understanding and knowledge than when we came in. Now, I do have a small addendum that wasn't planned. I do want to bring this up because this actually just happened this morning. Some of you may not know about this. Today, there were two Minnesota lawmakers who were assaulted. They were shot. They and their spouses were shot. Two of them did die, and the other two are in critical condition. They were both what would be considered liberal Democrats. This stuff is real, and I would rather we have events like this so that things like that aren't in the future. So I just want to highlight how real and how close this is to all of us. So sorry to bring down the mood, but this is important, and I think you all should know.
Which one, was it the two senators that passed? Or do we know?
We do know. It was Melissa Hardman. I'm from Minnesota.
Oh,
I'm the first
yeah, I
speaker.
saw the.
Yeah, so she was a prominent Democrat, and she and her husband were both assassinated. And then Senator Johnson and his wife were both shot at their houses, and they're out of the hospital. It looks like they may make it.
Do they have the people?
There's one guy, and they're looking for him.
Yeah, well, one
He's
person
impersonated a police officer. This was not a random thing. This was targeted.
Yes.
Targeted assassination.
So sorry to bring the mood down, but this is important. That's why we're here, so things like these don't happen. But I will, in you on time, but you can read his bio here. If you could please join me in welcoming Bill Donahue.
Well, I was going to have to begin with that shocking news. I had met Representative Melissa Horton. She was a person who reached out across the aisle, very bipartisan. So I'm going to be talking about polarization. And we have reached the point, I'm afraid, where this is becoming political violence. The two assassination attempts on Donald Trump last summer, and an assassination of a state legislator. So some of us were around in the late 1960s. We all started with the two Kennedys and King, and so it's pretty ominous when we get to this point. Anyway, so I'll build order from the Twin Cities. It's a lot hotter here. Down south. It was 60 degrees and we wore jackets when we got in our car. And then when we stopped at Story City for gas, it was like, where are we? But I have Iowa connections. I'm married in Iowa. My wife, Maria, back there, from Elkhorn, Iowa, near Atlanta. And we lived in Iowa City for 6 years. I taught in the medical school in Iowa City, so we're fans of Iowa with deep connections here. I taught family therapy for many years at the University of Minnesota, and I never was directly involved in political issues, but shortly after the 2016 presidential election, do you all remember that election? I got a call from a colleague of mine, David Leichenhorn, who lives in New York City. He had done work on fatherhood and other kinds of things. He had been on the phone with another colleague of ours, another David from Southwest Ohio, shortly after that election. And they were talking about how people were feeling about the election in New York City and in South Lebanon, Ohio. New York City, it was a funeral. In Southwest Ohio, mourning in America. And they decided on the spur of the moment to get 10 Hillary Clinton voters and 10 Donald Trump voters together for 13 hours over a weekend in early December in Southwest Ohio to see if they could talk with each other, not just about each other. And they called me and I said, that's pretty brave. What were you thinking of doing with them? And they said they didn't know, but they thought maybe I could figure that part out. And I laughed, actually it was harder, it wasn't after. Hoping I would not be free that weekend, but I was. So I, brought everything I knew about how to bring groups together. And we had a very powerful experience. When we asked people why they came, they said, we have children to raise here. We have schools and hospitals to maintain and roads to build, but we can't do it if we're just fighting each other all the time, because they had been. And so they had a very, very powerful experience. I thought it would be one-off, but they wanted a reunion and cashed in another frequent flyer ticket on the back, and we decided to keep going. And so we founded a nonprofit called Braver Angels, which is devoted to bridge building in a very divided world. And later on in my talk, I will refer back to that. But I want to pivot. That's how I get into this. I want to talk about polarization, and I want to engage you in some back and forth about the sources of polarization. So what do I mean by this? The political scientists who've been studying this call it affective polarization. And that is not just divisions about issues, but how we feel about each other when we vote differently and think differently. That has been on the rise. This sort of animosity we feel has been on the rise for at least 40 years. This is not a Donald Trump phenomenon. Okay, this has been rising for some time. It's spiking now. It's happening in other countries around the world. It's happening even in places like Canada. Think of Brexit in Britain. Every democracy in the world has had this rise in polarization over some decades. And of course, in our country, through multiple administrations. And a group of social scientists put this into 3 categories of polarization. The first is othering, and that is that people who vote and think differently about politics become alien to us. They're incomprehensible. And I invite you to ask yourself how often you have said to yourself, how could anybody possibly vote that way, support this policy? How could they? And that means they are alien. And of course, if we don't understand them, we make up our own reasons, none of which they recognize that way. So the first is othering. The second is disdain, that we not only don't understand each other, and I'm talking about the 75 to 80 million people who voted differently than I did or you did. Okay. Not just talking about what you think of Trump or something, but what do you think of all those people? Some of whom are, of course, in your family. So the second is disdain. We not only don't understand one another, we don't like each other. We hold each other more in contempt. In contempt. Contempt is the language of the day now. Disdain. And by the way, this is called, what the political science is called, out-party hate. Out-party hate is stronger than in-party love. We don't like our own political parties any more than we did 40 years ago, but we hate the other ones much more. Much more. There's a lot of research behind that statement I just said. So othering, disdain, and the third is that other people are morally bankrupt. They are bad people. If you support a candidate or you hold some attitudes towards immigration or whatever, then I think you are morally contemptible. Okay? You're a bad person. And they've shown this on the surveys, that people think, Republicans tend to think Democrats are morally inferior, and vice versa. That is quite a combination. I don't understand you, I don't like you, and you're bad. Other than that, nice to meet you. And this is, again, I want to underline, not just for political leaders that we hold these attitudes. These are in our extended families, friendship, and other circles. In fact, families are one of the last, extended families, one of the last bastions of political diversity, because you don't choose your cousins. You don't choose your in-laws. Okay? These people come with the territory, and then we get together with them. In fact, there's been documented after the 2016 election a decline in families having Thanksgiving dinner together in areas of the country that were more politically mixed, and so people are withdrawing. So in my field as a marriage and family therapist, we see cutoffs, family cutoffs, over politics. Never seen this. Done this work for 4 years. And even divorces that occur over who people vote for. So we're in a real pickle here that is, again, happening around the world. Negative partisanship, out-party hate. And this has invaded nearly all social institutions in our society. So I want to just do call out some. What are some social institutions that used to be seen as neutral or nonpartisan that in the last decade or so have been invaded by polarization? Who would call one out?
Libraries.
Libraries. We'll start with libraries. If you went back 20 years, library, boring. It's a terrible stereotype, but just completely nonpartisan, right? And now, it invaded by this. What's another one? Churches, so religious institutions. There's now evidence that people are choosing their religious organization based on their politics. Okay? Faith organizations. What are some others? Schools, okay? Now, schools always get caught up, like in the 60s around sex education. Schools are, a microcosm of society, but much more so now, and including school boards. So they used to compete with libraries for the most boring groups, right? And now school boards all corrupt. Okay, another one.
Cancer research.
Say again?
Labor
unions, okay. Well, they used to be in my lifetime reliably Democratic, and now they're splitting. Another one?
Cancer research.
Media, okay, of course, media. So many of us remember a time when there were 3 TV stations, commercial and then public, and when Walter Cronkite, old timer, he used to say at the end, and that's the way it is. June 13th, and we sort of believed it. Now, you can argue there was too much homogeneity at that time, and there were always things that media didn't cover. But now we're in an era of specialized media. Okay? I don't know about you, but breaking news. It's hardly ever breaking news. Somebody mentioned to me yesterday, breaking news is Saturday. Okay? So the media landscape, what's another institution?
Cancer research.
Yeah, so cancer research, all kinds of research, science. Again, science, science, and COVID really hit that hard. Now, we've always had disputes about science, and I know our next speaker, Aaron, is going to talk about evolution, so we've always had divisions. But not about vaccines and cancer research and nutritional research. The big picture, unfortunately we've had. But now scientists are suspect. And this comes up all the time. So the current issue around immigration, and people on one side saying that illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, are causing a lot of crime, and then others say, well, the research shows that undocumented immigrants do not commit more crimes than regular citizens. If you live in an era where science, where research is politicized, is seen as political, that means nothing. You might have just as well said my Aunt Lizzie claims, because people will not trust it. What's another institution?
Political parties.
Which one?
Political parties.
Political parties, well, yeah. And so a good point there, because it used to be that there were liberal Republicans, moderate Republicans, there were moderate and conservative Democrats. There was overlap. And that's where you got stuff done. And now, there's no overlap really. The most liberal Republican is pretty far to the right of the most conservative Democrat, and you get nothing done. And some of that's connected with gerrymandering, right? Because now there are very few in Congress, very few contested seats. And so the threat to you being thrown out of office is from your further left or further right. And you don't even have to talk to the people on the other side. Our Brave Rangers work, we've done workshops, I've done some workshops with members of Congress. If you want to feel a little hope today, Google the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a group of 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats and House representatives who meet every week and have lunch together and develop relationships, and they work on reform and bipartisan. They were the ones that got the infrastructure bill through, for example, back in the Biden era. So we did some workshops for them, and a Republican said that if somebody took a photo of him shaking hands with a Democrat, and it got out on social media at home, he could be primaried. The primaries become a verb. Okay. Unless you think it's just one side, because I'm making a wild guess, I'm in a group of more liberal than conservatives here. A Democrat told me that he was on a call with his constituents from a West Coast, a pretty liberal state, and a woman said, I really like you, Congressman, I like your values, I think, blah, blah, blah. I just wish you were more angry. Okay, so people want gladiators. So this is not just them out there in Congress and so on, it's also us. It's all, because he was the co-chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Okay, so he was not going to go around being angry all the time. Okay, how about any other institutions?
Supreme Court.
What's that?
Judges.
Judges, the Supreme Court, yes. So the Supreme Court used to be one of our most revered institutions. Way down. Now they say, is it an Obama judge, a Biden judge, a Trump judge? This is really a dangerous situation. And so the courts, any other institutions?
Food programs,
Food programs. So like
feeding kids in the summer.
yeah. So there's always been, so let me just say, there's always been contention about the social safety net. Okay, that goes back to the 1930s. So how much and how generous to be on that? And that of course has continued, but there's always been that kind of contention. So we could go on, there's hardly, okay, meteorology. Meteorology. Okay. FEMA, yes, FEMA. You know, the people would come and rescue us. Okay, universities. Right? We have a sense that traditional forms of authority and expertise are no longer accepted. So I want to make a point here now about the implications of this for what we see as fact and truth. Because in my view, policy relevant facts are things that very few of us have direct access to. Unless you're a climate scientist, you don't have direct access to that knowledge, to that data about whether we're seeing more than just normal changes in temperature and climate, and B, is it human caused? Unless you're a climate scientist, you don't have access to that. I mentioned the research on crimes committed by undocumented immigrants. Unless you study that, your access to that is based on who you trust. Do you trust those researchers? Do you trust the newspaper you read who reports what the researchers say? So I don't need any outside authorities to tell me I'm here speaking to you today, but that's not policy relevant. Almost any bit of information that's policy relevant is based on social trust. It is based on who you trust. Okay? If you, like me, tend to read the Science Times in the New York Times, and actually I've been interviewed a couple times by those journalists, I tend to trust them, that their reputations are on the line, that they're choosing good studies. They almost always interview the critics of the studies. They make mistakes, but I trust their integrity. And so when they tell me that 90% of climate scientists believe in human-caused climate change and fossil fuels, then for me, that's a pretty done deal. But if you don't trust the New York Times, and you get your news from Fox or somewhere else, who says, okay, here's the flip. Did you know there are 10% of brave scientists who are bucking the status quo, people who are pushing climate change on us? You can either say 90% is good, you believe it, or you can say the 10% are the rebels who are actually going to save us from too much government regulation. That's all based on trust. So what I'm suggesting is that when we have our conversations with one another across policy divides, in my view, it's a mistake to say, the facts are on my side, can't you see it? Because that just leads them to say, I don't trust who you think are the facts. And that the humility part of this is that I don't have direct access to that. And so what we're dealing with in the factual debates around policy is we're dealing with a drastic decline in common sources of trustworthiness. And the only solution to that, in my opinion, is to rebuild, and you're referring to this, is to rebuild trust, to rebuild trustworthiness. And some of that we can do one-on-one. But the arrogance about some of us, and I'm a social scientist, okay? I know people at the University of Minnesota who study climate science. I trust them. But I don't expect some of my relatives to trust them. And so if I come at my relatives and saying, basically, what kind of idiot are you? By the way, that's not a good opener. We're getting into communication skills. So what I'm saying to a group who value science, who value data, who value objectivity, I do, as we communicate with one another, as we deal as citizens with other citizens about these issues, it pays to come across as you and I are going to now talk about our views, and in that we will share our sources of information. And it's much better for me to say to somebody who rejects climate science that I happen to know a couple some kinds. And this is what I say, because I know this, they are nerds. They do not care about politics. They're just like, at the party, they go and hide in the corner. They don't care who you vote for. And that I know enough about how science works. If you had a reputable scientist who found a big flaw in that data and they could prove it, they get the Nobel Prize. Okay? That there is a self-correction in science, good science, where you go, whoa, something wrong with our data. But if I say that personally, as my understanding of this, instead of arrogantly, the other person is more likely to agree with me. So we are in a pickle, and we've been naming some of the sources of the rise in polarization. We talked about media, we talked about things like gerrymandering. What are some other sources of the rise in political polarization in the last 40 years? And by definition, they have to be either new things that have come along or changed things, so not human nature. And I also urge you, as you think about this, not to take the low road and say it's the other political side, because they've not been in France and Germany and England and Canada. This is a bigger phenomenon than any particular. Last time I asked this question, somebody said, Newt Gingrich. Okay, I get that. But why was he successful? Okay, so I'm urging you to think more broadly about social trends. So what do you want to say?
Social media.
Social media. So why social media?
It humanizes other people that you're interacting
Yeah, if you're not humanizing them. And all the political scientists point to social media. That wasn't around 4 years ago. It's and all of the aspects of this, the impersonality of it, the way you can propagate false information so quickly. It becomes an outrage machine. So social media is a huge factor here. Do you have one?
Reality TV.
Reality TV, and yes, and just all of what's happened with the multiplication of TV outlets, where we now seek our news based on our biases already. 24-hour news. Yeah. So for here's a little bit of data, and I have to trust that I think this is accurate. There are no more stranger abductions of children now than there were 4 years ago. Okay? If you take children under age 14 or something, all of them are tragic, but there are maybe 30 in the whole country in a year, according to the FBI. Every one of those is tragic. But you would not get that with 24/7 coverage. And Amber Alerts, okay, and all this. So, and then they've shown for some studies that the more local TV you watch, the more you think crime is taking us over. Okay, and so, and the more newspapers you read, the less you're likely to think that. So you have these sources of information. How about another one? Yeah.
Corporations are using all the things that have been said up to now in order to create fear and also to get their message across. You know, like what happened with cigarettes and against the cancer campaign.
Yeah.
And things like this, and that not only gets their message across, it creates that attitude in people that fosters this.
Outrage brings people's attention. Okay. Negative is higher. This is well established in research. that there is more, we pay more attention to negatives than positives. By the way, if you ever want to have somebody really listen to you for a long time, have a sad story. Or a scary story. Don't
But
talk
it-
about
but it has-
your great trip to Europe. You get like 90 seconds on that.
But my point is it has bleed over from the message they're trying to get, it has bleed over into other things.
Yeah, but no, we've weaponized information and advertising. So another one,
The Bible.
the Bible.
It's old and yet it's new in there.
So if I could push back, it's been the same, it's been the Bible for a long time.
But it changes.
But the interpretation is changed.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to have a debate on it. I don't think that has happened so much in the last 4 years. I mean, the fundamentalism and all that. So can we not debate that one? Yes, go for it.
Income disparity.
Income disparities. Yeah, yeah, right. Yes, so whenever you have income and asset disparity, increasing inequality, you get more social tension. You get more social unrest. And then you have demagogues that come along. I mean, this is part of when people over-focus on certain demagogues. Why are they listened to at a particular moment in time, as opposed to laughed off the stage? And so when you get greater income inequality, asset inequality, and when I add to that, and this is a hard one to talk about, but that every society that has a large-scale immigration has social unrest. The Scandinavian countries are experiencing that now. Okay, they used to kind of say, oh, you Americans. This is hard. This is hard, and there's good research on that. As much as anybody likes diversity, it's hard on the ground. And so that has been happening as well. So lots of factors. Do you have one more?
I was just going to say, it's been acceptable to be impolite.
Say it again.
It's become acceptable to be impolite.
Yeah. We've had a decline in those mores. And some of that, so I'm going to make a point about our current president here. When you have the normalization of anger and contempt from above, it trickles down to the whole society.
And
But
outlandish selves.
that's right. Last one.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Thanksgiving dinner. Yes, it's where a lot of this is coming out. So what we've been aiming for and what we've been having is a complex view instead of a view that it's the other party, and if we can beat them in the next election, we're going to be okay. Because that is what's been happening, is that each side blames the other, emphasizes the righteousness of their own position, and then looks for what are always temporary wins. So I want to talk practically for the last part of my time, and that is, what are some attitudes and skills that we as individuals can bring? Because what I'm suggesting is that this polarization is not just in Congress, not just in legislatures, it's in our hearts and minds and behaviors on the ground. And so here's some principles that I've learned in Braver Angels over this time, that I try to bring to my world. The first is to focus on concerns, not just viewpoints. If you start with, what do you think about Trump, or what do you think about the immigration policy? What do you think about national health insurance? If you start there and you stay there, you end up just with debating points, and you quickly devolve into, I don't believe your information. Okay. If you don't also learn about what people are worried and concerned about. So here's for me a breakthrough around climate science and climate change, because this is a division that could, in my opinion, could sink humanity. This is a big one. Underlying concerns about accepting the scientific consensus on climate change, on people who are on the right, we call Reds, Reds and Blues, is a worry about the solution having to be large-scale government regulation of the economy, and then for people's lives. a big worry that if you accept these premises, the only way out, the premises of climate science, is a government, basically takeover of everyday life in the economy. Now, you may say to yourself, well, I don't think that's likely. It's a serious concern. And it's very hard to accept science when my fear of accepting it is that I have to surrender something that's very important and dear to me. Whether or not you agree with that, what I'm saying is taking that seriously. So in Brave Our Angels, we've had we don't do policy work, but we have partnered with a group called the Citizens Climate Lobby, which is the only climate change group that has reds and blues in it. Because their first choice is market-based solutions. You get as far as you can with market, like carbon taxes and other things, before you go to government regulation. And so that's an example of finding some common ground. Can we, if I can offer you a solution to the climate thing that does not involve direct government regulation, we may have an entry then to have a conversation about change, because I found something, I've attended to your concern. Assume a second one, assume good intentions, or at least mixed intentions, instead of bad intentions, until proven otherwise. Each side interprets the views of the other, often in the worst possible way. So a lot of people on the right truly believe that Democrats favor immigration because the immigrants are going to be grateful to the Democratic Party and then keep them in power. Okay? Just as a lot of Democrats, a lot of blues, believe that keep the taxes down and have limited government is just to enrich yourself and have the rich get richer. Like there's nothing else involved. What I'm saying is I'm not saying there's no people with those attitudes, but when we assume that the bulk of people on the other side hold bad motives, and that my side, pure as the driven snow, instead of everybody's got a mixture, almost everybody, of altruism and self-interest. Okay? As opposed to the hypocrites are on that side, because both sides are calling each other hypocrites. A third principle, is to combine passion and humility. Passion about some problems in this world and that need to be addressed, with humility about whether you or I have a solution. I mean, as somebody who works in the family field, childhood poverty is one of the things that I think is a scourge on our country. Children don't deserve to be living in the stress of poverty, and that we have not prioritized that as a country. So I will argue that till doomsday, on moral grounds and ethical grounds and pragmatic grounds, because these are the kids growing up and take care of the rest of us. Exactly how to do that without unintended consequences, that's tough. So I hold the particular solutions more lightly. I welcome, for example, research on guaranteed family income. I'd like to see how that plays out. Okay? And by the way, some conservatives are for that because it eliminates the welfare bureaucracy. There's a check. But I'm also aware of the law of unintended consequences. So let's study it. So what I'm saying is combine passion about what we need to do with some humility about whether you or I have figured out, or anybody has figured out the solution. We have to just vote at some point on policies, but to hold them more lightly and evaluate those. Here's a good example, Head Start. When Head Start came in the 1960s, many of us celebrated. Now we know age 4 is too late. And we thought age 4 was really young. Now we know that infancy, early childhood, is where much more emphasis could be because kids' brains are getting pretty mature by age 4. So this is a critique of the left now. If I were to say that, and by the way, the studies show that Head Start gains, that they don't do much after about age 8, it wipes out. And a good hypothesis for that is starting too late. As a blue, if I were to say that in a lot of circles and suggest that we may have to reallocate resources, I'm going to be thrown out of the tribe. So some humility is what I'm suggesting about solutions. And then here's one we use with public officials. Aim for accurate disagreement instead of distorted disagreement. Accurate disagreement means that I understand your view, which differs from mine, well enough that I can articulate it and the reasons you hold that view in such a way that you would say, yep, you got it. Thank you. You understand my view and why I hold it, which is often the concern center. You realize how rare that is? Because what we do is we just argue yours, my facts, and we go on. So, but the challenge is here for anything that you drastically differ on with somebody on public policy, to study, to read the smartest people who hold it, and to try to get to the point where you could articulate that position with vigor, and then say how you disagree. Because when we've done this exercise, if you can actually find accurate disagreement, you actually find out where you do agree. But I'm suggesting it as a mental discipline, and to when you find yourself having complex explanations for your own views and very simplistic ones for the other side, there's always more. There's always more. So a few skills. The key skill we've learned from Brave Angels is to connect first before you disagree. Connect before you disagree. So it's not that you say cats, I say dogs, you say up, I say down. So I get you on cats. You really love cats. Cool. We're going to talk about dogs. Okay. What we tend to do in our arguments is we don't acknowledge that we got what the other said. We just refute it. And so the connecting part, and then here's one of the things that I just have really learned in my own life. If I can find something to agree with before I disagree, something to agree with before I disagree, this is like a formula for a connection. And you can almost always find something to agree with, at least at the level of, this is a big problem. Yes, we're very delighted on it. It's very important. Agree with you. We have to figure this out. We have to figure out how to, improve the education of our kids. Or here's one with immigration. It's a mess. The system's a mess. It needs change. I think everybody agrees on that. So, in other words, before I say what you're doing is unfair, to say we have a broken system, I'm with you on that. Okay, if that's what you're. Can you see the advantage of that? You connect. You find something to agree with before you disagree. And then the other one is to frame your viewpoints with what we call I statements rather than truth statements. This is where I come down on this. These are the sources of information I'm bringing on this. As opposed to, here is how it is. Can I say it more suitably? Okay, I'm better at a term called bluesplaining, like mansplaining. So, I know you're having trouble with the idea of what you're blues, so I'm going to go slowly. You've heard of slavery? Good. Jim Crow, right? And it drives Reds crazy because they feel patronized. And so the way around that is to speak for self, not necessarily watering anything down, but to say, this is where I come down on this. This is how I came to this view. And then I'm interested in yours. So let me finish and take a couple of questions here. Yeah.
Two points. One is, how do you deal with a lot of the people on the other side, I'm with them also, a lot of people on the other side use the technique that they've learned from podcasts where they pepper you with 7 or 10 points, and you say, okay, let me take one of them, and I want you to come back with only one response.
Yeah, that's good.
And then they come back with 7 or 10 responses each time. And the other thing is, how do you deal with when they don't...
You just snuck in the second question.
Right.
I'm only going to do the first one. Yeah, I'm only do the first one. Yeah, you're very clever. You just went, well, I love what you're talking about. You have to sometimes take over the conversation, not with the content, but with the process. Say, can we slow down? So you're saying some things I want to hear and I want to respond to. Could we go with one, just like I did with you? Could we go with one of those? Okay. And see if you can get an agreement from the other person that we're going to just do that one. There's another little technique we use in we do workshops training people how to talk across the differences. It's called a pivot. And that is somebody is talking and then instead of offering your point, you can say, so I have some thoughts about that. Can I speak to that? They almost always say yes, at least in Minnesota and Iowa. and then...
My family's in New York.
Yeah, this is specialized in the New York workshop. Okay. But another, what's called pivot, is like, is it my turn? And if they ride right past that, just let them go and exit the conversation. I don't share my views with somebody who is indicating in every possible way they're not interested in it. It's too frustrating. And so in our skills, we talk about exit skills. How to exit, you don't say that you're not listening to me. You say, so I think we've gone about as far as I want to go right now. And let's watch the ball game or something. Okay. So, but I like what you're saying. Take over the process and see if you can get an agreement. Go for it. Whataboutism? Well, what aboutism?
I find that to be one of the most persistent things that comes up.
Yeah, Biden did the same thing.
Right, exactly.
Right.
We said in the Marines, well, but your side would have done that.
Right. Yeah, so that's what drives me crazy too. What that is changing the subject. So what I do is to say, I realize there's we could talk about lots of presidents. What I was bringing up was about our current president. Can we talk about that now? And then if they keep doing it, let it go. Leave the conversation. Yeah, go for it.
I was wondering, so this is great, and I think...
There's a but coming.
No.
Okay, but somebody says this is great.
I just have a statement and a question.
Okay.
Because I think it's wonderful because you can get people to stay on topic. I think that's one of the problems when you're talking to blue and reds, is that you bring up something and they'll say, well, what about this?
Right.
What we were just talking about. But there
was a but.
Yes.
I know you're coming. I can give you but, can I not? Okay.
Where is there room for education? I understand the need to be humble, but there is a lot of misinformation.
Sure.
There are no transgender mice in this world. There are transgenic mice. So how do we go
What those
about...
words?
Well, our current president is saying that we have mice that are transgender rather than saying that they're transgenic. And that's what that gentleman over there was discussing when he was saying that
Be
it's
very
affecting our
careful.
cancer research.
Be very
And
careful.
so a lot of scientists are not even looking for grants further. They're saying, I'm old enough, I'm just going to retire, which is not something a scientist normally does. They usually just kind of stay professor.
You cannot enlighten people. So my response?
Yes.
Give up trying to enlighten people. Give up trying to educate somebody who isn't asking to be educated. Okay?
A lot of misinformation.
Well, I understand, but here's what I'm saying is two parts. Give up in a conversation trying to enlighten the other person now. But here, directly, here's what you can say. So I've actually been looking into this because I've got friends and blah, 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 and here's what I have been learning about trans and transgender. This is what I've been learning about that from the sources that I go to. And I understand you see that differently. The goal is, out of this conversation, somebody sees you holding a different view as reasonable and respectful. Then they will think about it. She's a nice person. She treated me respectfully. She talked about her views on this. and then I'm going to think about it. But in the moment, this is hard. This is hard. In the moment, I have to give up getting through to somebody. Getting through to somebody feels like an assault. And think of it when you're in the other end. Somebody wants to get through to you religiously or something, right? Church and state. Like, wow. So thank you for that, because it helps me to say that. In the short term, giving up what I'm going to convince you, but in the long run, I'm going to relate respectfully and tell you where I come from. And then I'm going to let you go. But and there's good social science research on this, by the way, that people, if they feel like this is a positive encounter, they're more apt to be influenced. It's a paradox. You give up trying to directly influence, and you are more influential. There's a line from Henry David Thoreau, beware if you see somebody approaching you with the obvious intent of doing you good, run for your life. And I'm saying this is just the others who do it to some of us, but we can do it to them. So a couple more and then we'll move on. Yeah.
I was just making the comment that it's much easier to, I don't know, when you're speaking to someone in person as opposed to online. It's
Yes.
way easier
Yes.
to be
Yes.
a lot more kind
Yeah.
because you're facing them right
Yeah,
there.
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't do political discussions online. Do not do them. Face-to-face or phone, face-to-face discuss, but don't go there. I completely agree. Thank you for that. Yes.
I participate in Brave Rangers of the Alliance names, okay? And
Hand him the mic because people can't hear.
I participate in the Brave Rangers Alliance of names on occasion. And my wife tells me, well, why do you go? Because nothing ever changes. We have great discussions, we're all very civil, we go to lunch, and I come back and she says, well, what'd you change? Could you address that a little bit?
Yeah.
nothing happens.
Yeah.
So my view, my big view on this is that we have a breakdown in trust for one another, and then we have demagogues who take advantage of that. And so what we're doing with Brave Angels is building relationships. Both at the local level and at the larger public officials level. And then let what emerges from that emerge, as opposed to programming. And I'd like to end with an example from a workshop I did with members of the New Hampshire State Legislature. They did 5 Brave Angels workshops, and they now have formed their own caucus, Brave Angels Caucus. Okay, red or blue. Okay, and at one of the early workshops, we had them. Well, the story. COVID was ending. Walked into the committee room. The Democrats were sitting on this wall with masks. The Republicans were sitting on that wall without masks. It was like the old basketball shirts and skins. They were sitting so far apart we had to use a microphone for introductions. Yeah. We got them into small groups. In smaller rooms, Democrats took off their masks. And everybody had 5 minutes, uninterrupted, to answer this question. What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? And I've done this with elected officials as regular people. A lot of times there are tears as people talk about experiences of hardship, of family, of inspiration. And in this particular workshop, a Democrat sitting on this side said that he grew up in the foster care system. His father abandoned the family, his mother suffered from paranoid schizophrenia, and he and his siblings had a very tough childhood. And that was part of the driving influence for him to get into public service and public life. He no sooner finished than a Republican sitting on this side said, oh my goodness, I don't believe this. I grew up in the foster care system. And he told his story. And they differed on policy because the Republican, he doesn't like government solutions. So he got into the voluntary sector and labor and other sectors that were not government. And the Democrat, was interested in more government sector. But the underlying passion and values and life experiences were similar. When you get somebody's story, this is something we've learned with Burger Angels, when you get their story, you understand it. And in every passionate political belief, there's a story. So, what directly comes out of this? Well, I'll tell you, this is how, when we ask people again, what are you taking with you? And what the Republicans said was, what I'm taking with me is you can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. You can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. So we don't have the answer to all of it, but we're working at the level of human being to human being. I'd like to encourage you to check out Braver Angels. Just Google it. We're a membership organization, $12 a year. We have local chapters. We have lots of workshops. We have lots of ways to connect, including one-to-one conversation with somebody who differs from you. And I appreciate the warm weather here. Keep it up, and I appreciate the invitation to be here. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was great. We are going to take a small 10-minute break to allow Ara to get set up. So if you want to get a snack in the restroom, and I guess we have Senator Donahue, who would actually like to say some words while we have our break.